she looked at me and I felt like she lunged at me across the table. But all I heard from her out of her mouth is that she said to me, "You cannot open up an adolescent IOP." And my immediate trigger was, Mom? Like, that person then turned into my mother inside my head. And I walked out of that meeting with my husband and I said, she did not know me very well, because when you say you can't to me, like the couple of people that I value who have said that I can't do something, that really makes me prove you wrong.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, it's Erin. I'm excited to bring you another Buck That story in our series where we're telling one story at a time how people decided to buck the norm and had great things happen. Today, we have Kristine Schlichting, a nice Jewish name, who truly went from a shitty life, and she'll tell you about that literal shit, where you can't was on repeat, like literally, to becoming a psychologist who leads and oversees over 30 psychiatrists and other professionals and runs and is also really growing the only national intensive outpatient program that helps adults and adolescents with extreme mental health challenges. And this story is so important because it's inspiring and it also sheds a light on what I think is a new opportunity in the mental health space, a model that isn't being used many places, but Kristine believes so strongly in it. So whether you listen for what she does differently in the mindset to buck the norm, or you listen because you or people you know are struggling with mental health and are looking for something that will actually work, I think there might be a really important message in here as well. So today's episode, she tells us the story of what catalyzed her to say buck that, and also the steps and the mindset that guided her along the way. So I hope you enjoy this talk and this buck that story with Kristine.
I grew up in Indiana. I was a young actress at a very young age. I did a lot of plays. I always loved being on stage. I always loved the idea of molding into somebody else's life and sort of being a detective in somebody else's life, which is interesting given that I am a psychologist and I now kind of do that for work in terms of really trying on someone else's shoes and really trying to come from a very empathetic, deep understanding of where that person is and where they're coming from and how I can help them go where they want to go. I was always a very sickly kid. A lot of people would not think that I was a sickly child. I had a lot of different illnesses growing up. I got a lot of attention for being sick. I think in retrospect, I stayed sick a lot to get attention from people in my family. And as I started growing up and going to college, I really wanted to be a doctor. I really wanted to heal people. I was fascinated by the body. And one of the first times I heard very strongly from my parents was, you can't because you're sick and you get sick a lot and you're not going to be able to keep up with the classes and the training and the 24-hour shifts that doctors have, and that's going to be impossible for you. You're going to have to think about having a job that's very stable, where you can have a lot of sick time and it won't stress you out too much. It really was hard for me because that was really something I wanted to do. You go to college and you're at college and you have these big dreams. You're meeting other people doing big things. You're seeing what the possibilities are out there. And then I would go home and I would sort of be told, you can't do that. That's not something you're going to be successful in. But it took me some time. And I think getting a little bit older, I have very much enjoyed becoming older and wiser and having history and really seeing that this idea of you can't is very much a self-construct. And I just started to be like, there's so many things that I want to do. And I think I really just started opening up my eyes about how I live my life and whether or not that is aligned with me, Kristine, and not worrying about being so aligned with other people. When I was in graduate school and I was going to school for psychology, I have ulcerative colitis and IBS. And at times in my life, it's been extremely debilitating to the point that I really wasn't able to do very much. I was really almost like not able to leave the house. It's a disease that you are basically not able to get out of the bathroom. So it's a shameful, ugly, terrible disease, also a wasting disease where I couldn't gain weight. People would always say how great I looked because I was thin and assume that I was extremely healthy and I was actually quite ill. I went to a doctor and he told me that I'm going to need to get surgery and I'm going to need to be on a bag for the rest of my life. And I probably should forget about having kids because that's just not going to happen to me because my body can't handle it. Well, that was a FU moment for me. That was probably the first strongest buck that moment. And that I decided that that is not something I'm going to accept. And I'm going to do absolutely everything I can to heal myself, to make myself better, to make sure that I do have the ability to have dreams and do the things that I love to do. I am the only psychologist in the United States, as far as I can tell, that has their own IOP. So an IOP is an intensive outpatient program. The ones that we have right now are for tweens and teens. It's a 4-day-a-week program after school. The idea of IOP is, and a lot of people associate IOP with substance abuse. Our IOPs are not substance abuse. Our IOPs are mental health. So we are addressing a lot of different issues, specifically depression, anxiety, suicidality, suicide ideation, self-harm. However, people don't have to be self-harming or suicidal to benefit from IOP. It's generally a group setting, and you go through a specific curriculum, at least within our IOP, that's what we do. And so kids really learn a lot about themselves. They learn a lot about who they are, how they understand their world, what kind of things stress them out, what sort of triggers they have, and then what to do with them, how to deal with conflict, how to develop healthy relationships, how to say no to peer pressure, what to do when you feel underwater and when you feel like nobody understands you. How do you label your emotions and start talking about them and then working through them? So it really is learning how to help yourself, learning about yourself, and then learning how to help yourself. And they're the life skills that you have for the rest of your life. These are not things that parents are teaching at home. And these are certainly not things that you're getting from TikTok. The beauty of IOP is group. And a lot of people in this current environment are very much against groups. And that has changed significantly from about 15 years ago when a lot of therapy happened in groups. And I really believe a lot of it has to do with technology and social media. I think technology has turned ourselves and our kids into mini narcissists. I think people spend a lot of time online searching their own interests and developing things within themselves and and not thinking about other people, not developing relationships, having a very easy time of just shutting the phone off if they don't want to have a conversation. You can't do that in a group. You have to actually work through a lot of those different emotions and get feedback from different people that may not always be positive. And you learn what to do with that. And that's how change happens. And that is why it's so important to add this as a category back into mental health and have people really start searching it out and using it. So IOP typically is housed within a hospital situation. 99% of IOPs are within hospitals. The other set of IOPs may be opened by sometimes they have franchises, oftentimes they're addiction IOPs. They also may be in residential areas, like for inpatient residential, they may have an IOP attached to them. It's extremely, extremely rare to have a private practice that owns its own IOP. And then it's even more rare for a psychologist. And like I said, I haven't been able to find anybody else in the United States who's a psychologist who has their own IOP. I've always been interested in being an entrepreneur. I really caught the business bug when I opened up my own practice, and I really started to see what it's like to own something myself and to be a boss for myself and to really develop and hone and cultivate. I was looking to get into a mental health business that's different than counseling because I like individual counseling, but there's not a lot of ways to cut it. There's not a lot of ways to really manage it because it happens behind closed doors. There's not a lot of growth ability within individual counseling. I hate virtual counseling, so that's not something I wanted to get into. So there were a couple avenues that we were looking at, and IOP was one of them. And we went to a meeting and we were talking to some people who had their own adolescent IOP. We were thinking about working together with them and in conjunction with them. And originally I was going to be thinking about opening up a young adult IOP. And we started talking and I started thinking more seriously about IOPs and who I feel very passionate about in terms of healing and who I've worked with the best, I think, in my life. And it's really been adolescents. I've always loved working with adolescents. I think they're on the crux of a lot of different things. I think they are very flexible thinkers. They are very insightful and they see a lot of things. And I think there's not a lot of BS with adolescents, which I really like. And so I said to this person that we were sitting with, I think we would like to do an adolescent IOP, that we would like to start with that. And she looked at me and I felt like she lunged at me across the table. But all I heard from her out of her mouth is that she said to me, "You cannot open up an adolescent IOP." And my immediate trigger was, Mom? That person then turned into my mother inside my head. And I walked out of that meeting with my husband and I said, she did not know me very well, because when you say you can't to me, like the couple of people that I value who have said that I can't do something, that really makes me prove you wrong. And it's been an incredibly long, difficult road.
You went forth and did it.
I went forth and we did it. And it was incredibly hard, but we did it. And now we are opening up more and more and more IOPs and programs throughout Connecticut. And now we're also looking at Massachusetts as well. I'm really looking to establish IOP as a new category for mental health to really help keep people out of hospitals, which people are not getting actual treatment in mental health hospitals. You're being stabilized, but in terms of actual heavy lifting treatment, that's not happening in the hospital. And it actually ends up backfiring in a pretty big way. That's recently one of the biggest moments that has like played over and over in my head because I have used that for fire and fuel to really get me through some very difficult times with doing this and having zero support. So having nobody from any professional organizations able to help me with this, nobody I could call up or ask for help because we're a competitor. So this was completely homegrown and we did it all ourselves.
Wow. Yeah, there's no playbook for that. As you think back on your passionate quest to reinvent mental health for children and those moments where somebody told you how to do it or what you could or couldn't do, other than you being fueled by you can't, what are a couple other things that you've learned in that journey?
So I have psychiatrists that work for me. I have APRNs. I have PAs. I have full medical staff. I also have therapists. So it's very unusual for a female psychologist who's really not, I'm not the best qualified. I don't have an MD. I don't have the upper level credentials. I'm just a PhD. Most psychologists really can't relate. I don't really associate with very many because they absolutely can't relate to what I'm doing. And I wouldn't say they're overly supportive, you know, because I am doing something completely different. The typical thing for a psychologist to do is to open up their own practice, especially in Connecticut by themselves, not take insurance. If someone pays $3.50 an hour or whatever to come see you, and you just run cash payments and you have that very upper level C-suite clientele. My model is very different. We are completely insurance based. We do take state Husky as well for our office. And, so I am passionate about making our services available and accessible to everybody and not just a small portion of the population. And there's a lot of psychologists that don't do that.
I just have one kind of last question for those that are listening that might say, okay, well, I haven't actually had people literally say I can't. And in fact, I think a lot of people encourage me, but I am saying I can't because I am caught up in comparing myself to who I see on, LinkedIn or Instagram, or who I see in my company that seems to be doing better, or the person that just got a job faster than me as I look for something, but so that person that's really actually the one that's saying you can't to themselves. What one piece of advice would you give them?
People have always said to me my whole life, like, I don't know why you stayed in Connecticut. Everybody was always like, I thought you'd end up in California or somewhere cool or whatever. So in high school, I went to high school with a bunch of very famous people, like a guy in Weezer, a guy who works at Google. Like it's just they're weirdly popular and highly successful, mostly in the arts and technology. So I follow them, and I was following a friend of mine, and she's like head of a very large, famous museum in LA. And, I'm sitting in Connecticut in the cold, with my freaking like Patagonia fleece on, right? And I'm watching her like up on Facebook with Keanu Reeves, or like Tom Cruise or, like all these famous people, like, and she's being photographed and stuff like that. And I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm a loser. And I love this woman. But I was just like highly jealous of her and how cool her life looked. And we actually got together and she came back to Connecticut and we talked. And what I had been seeing was something completely that really was not real. I mean, inside her life was falling apart. There were a lot of problems. What I was seeing was 100% not what was really happening. So I kind of remember that like all the time now. And I think as you get older, you have more and more of those experiences of where you thought one thing was something and it really wasn't. And you really have no idea what is actually going on. I mean, there is so much lipstick and especially now with social media, there's literally like life filters, that people put on. So we really don't know. We really have no idea what is happening. And actually, given my job and the kind of pain and hurt that I hear about from people, I don't really compare myself to people anymore. And I don't really look at other people and say, like, I wish I was that, because believe me, that person could be suicidal. Like that person, that might look like an incredible situation, and inside that person is dying. So I think we as people need to really check ourselves. Where is that time going where you're wasting time looking at somebody else, thinking that something else is going on? Like, what do you have and what can you do? And what is the first step today that you can do to get you closer to what you believe your next step to happiness is, or success, or whatever it is that you want to achieve? We as women waste so much time. Like, get over it. Like, totally get over it. I mean, you and I talked like all that freaking time we wasted in our 20s when we have like a 26-inch waist. Like, why did I waste that time? Like, I should have been rocking that. Like, damn, that is something that is going to be a huge hurdle to our ability to be successful. If we sit around and we look at other people and we waste time thinking that we should be there or we can't get there, or if we're not there, we're not good enough. Just do it and go through the steps and execute and do. Don't get in your own head, because that is where dreams die.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.